when he uses such a big bet size, his range should be extremely polarized, right? If Stefan had a hand like kings plus spade, he cannot even use this sizing. So he's representing a very polarized range here. Stefan raises to 2.6x on the button, roughly, which is a little bit larger than you would usually see. Most people go around 2.2 to 2.5. Maybe it's because they're a little bit deeper, about 140 bigs effective. Bit2Easy is going to do a lot of calling against his sizing, but he makes it 10 and a bit big blinds, which is absolutely fine. And he gets called, otherwise the hand would be a bit boring. And we see this Jack 9-8 flop, which is very interesting. I actually reviewed this exact hand in a... No, I'm sorry. I reviewed this exact board in a Bluff the Spot Lab Plus video I made a few days ago, you know, where I 3-bet heads up at 75-150, and I got exactly Jack 9-8 flush draw. So if you want to see a more in-depth breakdown, you should check out the video when it's released on the Bluff the Spot Lab. But here, I'll tell you that this board is great for both players. Bit2Easy is going to have jacks and 9s and 8s and queen 10 suited and maybe 10-7 suited or maybe queen 10 off, 2 pairs, over pairs, flush draws. He has all the good stuff. But the thing is, Stefan has a lot of the good stuff too, right? 8s, 9s, queen 10, 10-7, hands like 9-8 and jack 9. So Bit2Easy is doing well, but Stefan's doing well also. Whereas if the board is something like ace, ace, deuce, well, Bit2Easy is obviously doing great, Stefan is doing okay, but Stefan often just has a hand like 10-9 suited, no backdoor flush draw, and he's just got nothing, right? So it's a board on which you're very far ahead or very far behind. Whereas on a board like this, you know, everybody's got a little bit of everything. So I would expect a lot of checking from Bit2Easy. Stefan bets on the smaller side, and Bit2Easy should be quite aggressive with his check calls and his check raises. Decides to check call. King is an interesting card. Against his small sizing, I would expect Bit2Easy to obviously continue with hands like king 10, king queen, ace king. So he will have a decent amount of kings. You know, hands like king 10 of hearts, you know, stuff like that as well. King 9 of hearts. And he should also have some flushes. You know, if he has a hand like maybe 9-7 of clubs, he could definitely check call the flop. But then again, Stefan gets there as well with some of his bluffs, especially with the flush draws. So he goes for a pretty big bet, and when he bets this big, he's saying he's got at least 2 pair. But oftentimes he's got hands like, you know, flushes and whatnot. Bit2Easy shouldn't really do much raising here. I mean, Stefan is saying, hey, I've got a flush or a straight or maybe a set, maybe 2 pair. Against that range, you don't really want to do much raising. Your range is very, very, you know, his range is very strong, so you have to be careful. River is a 6, which doesn't really do anything. I guess 7-5 suited gets there, but, you know, it's unlikely Stefan just takes like 7-5 of hearts and goes to town. It's definitely possible, though, so if anything, it hurts a tiny, tiny bit. And Bit2Easy's thinking, well, what is this guy bluffing with? Maybe a hand like ace-10 with a club or something like that. Maybe like an under pair. Maybe he merged bet a hand like 10-9 on the flop and is now turning it into a bluff. Okay, so Stefan has 5-3 clubs and Bit2Easy has king jack of spades. Interesting. So obviously easy 3-bet by Bit2Easy. Stefan is opening, let's say, like 80% of the time, and against that range, king jack suited is absolutely crushing. And then 5-3 suited is a fine hand to call with. You know, obviously it's one of the weaker hands you're calling with, but I think it's winning. And then on the flop, Bit2Easy correctly identifies that he has to have quite a few checks in his range because Stefan is doing quite well. Stefan decides to bet with a very weak flush draw. Definitely a hand you could decide to check behind sometimes, but this time he decided to bet, and he barreled through with a flush, which is obviously fine. I'll give Stefan an 8.5 out of 10. I think his play is pretty solid. You can definitely take a different line, but the play is good. And I like Bit2Easy's play as well. I like the flop check. Obviously, I like the turn check call. And on the river, maybe you beat a worst 2 pair occasionally, and obviously you beat a couple of bluffs. So against a very aggressive player like Stefan, I don't think you can fold. Obviously, it's a marginal call on the river. He's not happy about it. Even somebody aggressive like Stefan has a lot of value bets. So, but I do think calling is the best play. So I'll give Bit2Easy an 8.5 as well. So nice first hand. What do you guys think about it? Bit2Easy's on the button this time, and he goes 2.5x. +1 Snickers. We haven't used the Snickers reference in a bit, but he made 1 Snickers. Probably in the UK, it's more like half a Snickers, though. Okay, so Stefan makes it 12 big blinds, actually, which is much larger than Bit2Easy 3-bet 2, but it's fine. It just changes his 3-bet range a little bit, it changes his C-bet range a little bit, but it's absolutely fine. You know, OTB famously would use like a small sizing, but also make it like 700 here. Linus even uses like a 15 big blind 3-bet size sometimes. To be honest, I haven't really researched that, so I'm not sure what he's doing with it yet. And we see the 7-6-4 monotone board, which is, again, a very scary board for both players. I mean, Bit2Easy can have plenty of flushes, right? He can have sets, he can have a couple of 2 pairs, he can have open-enders and gut shots and whatnot. So Stefan definitely has to be careful. Being careful starts with doing a lot of checking, but I'm fine with him having some bets. And when he does bet, he actually bets small, right? So he's being careful, saying, hey, I'm building the pot a little bit, I'm getting value, at least if I'm value betting. But at the same time, not making the pot too large. You know, if I don't see a good card on turn and river, I've kept the pot small, and I can, you know, I can get to showdown pretty cheaply, potentially. So he c-bets and turns an 8, which is obviously a card, another scary card. I mean, Bit2Easy can easily have a 5, 2 pair set, you know, 10-9 straight. Maybe the 9-5 suited straight as well. So Stefan has to be quite careful here. He's not only afraid of a set, but also, you know, a straight, a flush, 2 pair. You know, even if Bit2Easy had a hand like ace of spades 10, I mean, that has a lot of equity against basically any hand in Stefan's range. So Stefan should be quite careful here. But Stefan says, fuck you, I've got a flush basically. I've got a hand like 10-9. So when he uses such a big bet size, his range should be extremely polarized, right? If Stefan had a hand like kings plus spade, he cannot even use this sizing. So he's representing a very polarized range here. Bit2Easy does call. And river's a jack, which doesn't change a whole lot. I don't think Stefan is betting a hand like jack 8 or jacks for this sizing on the turn. So, I mean, I guess Bit2Easy could have a hand like jacks plus spade that now has a set. But other than that, probably not. And jack should be 4-betting regardless. So this card doesn't change much. I guess some of the, you know, ace of spades, jack type hands get there for Stefan. But that's still quite a thin value bet. Okay, so, interesting. Stefan 3-bet with king queen off, definitely standard play. And then he barreled through. And your hand is not a bad bluffing candidate. You know, I mean, you've got only king high, you have the king of spades blocker, so that's not a bad thing. But he was really, really aggressive, right? And he didn't really respect the fact that Bit2Easy is so strong on this run out. So this play is quite aggressive. Can you make it sometimes as part of a good strategy? Yes. But it's very easy to overdo do this, obviously, with hands like, you know, king 10, king queen, ace king, ace queen, you know, maybe even some kind of ace 10 type of hand or ace 9. So Stefan has to be careful that he's not overly aggressive here. Obviously, this is one hand, so we don't really know if this was just part of like one aggressive play or if he always does this, right? I'll give him a 7.5 out of 10. Bit2Easy called 10-9 off against a 12 big blind 3-bet. That's quite loose, to be honest. But it's okay. You know, Stefan does 3-bet aggressively. And then, you know, he called the flop c-bet with, you know, a decent flush on a gut shot, and obviously called down. So I'll give him an 8.5 out of 10. Stefan's on the button again. And he makes it 125 this time. Notice how before he made it, you know, almost 130. So it's kind of cool that he's adjusting his sizing based on the stack depth. So yeah, cool play so far, even though it's such a, you know, such a small little detail. We see a jack 8-3 flop, and Stefan bets half pot here. He's thinking, well, this board is kind of draw-heavy. You know, queen, a king, an ace, 3 over cards. You know, the jack and the 8 are kind of relevant. Flush draws, straight draws out there. You know, it's not a board in which Bit2Easy is just going to snap fold against a third pot bet. So he sized up a little bit, and I like the fact that he doesn't go third pot here. Bit2Easy can still check call and, you know, check raise quite a bit. Obviously, the board's not that bad for him. Turn 3, obviously this is a better card for Bit2Easy, but actually not by very much. You know, Stefan would check behind a decent amount of 3s, but Bit2Easy would always just call a 3 on the flop, right? Or almost always. And then from pre-flop, you know, the amount of 3s is actually pretty similar. So Stefan decides to bet 3/4, saying, hey, I've got a pretty strong range, mostly, you know, decent jack or better. But at the same time, hey, I don't want to make it too large because, you know, the 3 is in Bit2Easy's range. Ace river, Bit2Easy can definitely have a hand like ace 8, you know, but a hand like ace jack would often 3-bet. He could be slow playing, you know, a hand like ace 3 maybe, or weaker 3, but mostly he would raise. And he could have some hands like 8x of hearts, or, you know, just some hands like king 5 of hearts. So Stefan is definitely doing much better on this river, especially when it comes to like flushes, full houses, but Bit2Easy is doing okay as well. And we see this really sick play. So Stefan goes for twice the pot, which I think is a fine sizing to implement here sometimes. I mean, obviously, the vast majority of your range wants to bet a smaller sizing, but I think you can use this one. And now Bit2Easy actually checks shoves here. I've seen Bit2Easy bluff like this many, many times, so I definitely know he's capable. But at the same time, you know, he knows he's giving Stefan great odds, so he cannot be bluffing that much. A good hand to be bluffing with here would be a hand like ace 8, right? You block aces, you block 8s. You unblock a lot of bluffs like 10-9. So, yeah, ace 8 would be a good bluffing hand for Bit2Easy. Okay. So, Bit2Easy did have ace 3. You know, his pre-flop call is very good. Flop call is good. On the turn, check raising is definitely a thing, but at the same time, I don't mind him check calling. Ace 3 specifically is actually pretty good to check call with. And on the river, despite facing that big overbet, I think he can still shove. So, obviously, he can lose hands like jacks and 8s, whatnot, but I think he can still shove. You know, it's a heads-up game, 2 aggressive players. I think shoving's best. And Stefan called here. Stefan probably thinks Bit2Easy doesn't shove the nut flush, or he might not. And so, you know, he's got a good flush, and he probably thinks that Bit2Easy has bluffs here, like, you know, an 8, like ace 8, that type of stuff. And as I said, he knows Bit2Easy is definitely capable, so I don't think he can fold. Obviously, he is bluff catching at this point. He also doesn't block any full houses, but I don't think he can fold getting this price against such a competent opponent. I'll give Bit2Easy a 9.5 out of 10. I like everything about his play. Obviously, he should raise the turn sometimes, but not raising always is perfectly fine. So I think his play is great. Stefan's play, I'll give him a 7.5 out of 10. It's a little bit worse than Bit2Easy's play, not just because he lost, but I like the play as well. Bit2Easy on the button again, and he makes it 225. Sorry, he makes it 2.5. Only a call by Stefan this time. And we see a pretty good board. It's not a board that improves Bit2Easy a whole lot. It's just a board that doesn't improve anybody too much. And obviously, since Bit2Easy raised a stronger range, he's going to be ahead. So he goes for a small bet at a pretty high frequency, I would imagine. 9 is a pretty good turn for him. You know, a lot of his backdoor bluffs, like, you know, Queen 9 and 9-7 and 9-6, whatnot, get there. So he's going to do a lot of checking here. If he bets, I expect a big bet. You know, even over pot, I wouldn't be surprised to see. I like it. Good bet size by him, about 1.5x pot. But Stefan still calls. You know, if he has a jack, he's never folding. If he's got some kind of pair with a good kicker, I don't think he's folding. The 3 doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, it does improve 6-4 and ace-4, which obviously matters, but it's not extremely relevant. Not as relevant as, let's say, the 8 of spades, right? Which completes like 6-7, queen 10, all that kind of stuff. 10-7. So Bit2Easy shoves here. So he's saying he has a hand like, you know, a set, a good 2-pair, or a hand like 6-4, ace-4. Wow. So Bit2Easy was saying he's got ace-4, but in fact he had jack-9. You know, can't blame him for betting the flop, can't blame him for betting the turn. Obviously, river mandatory bet. He could have picked a smaller sizing if he wanted to, but I think it's fine. He shoved for around 2.5 times the pot, it seems. And Stefan actually got really lucky. I mean, I like Stefan's pre-flop call, I like the flop call. You know, you can raise sometimes, but calling is standard. And on the turn, Stefan's thinking, well, you know, my 3's an out. I can use my a spade to bluff on or to bluff catch on. You know, I unblock a lot of 6-7, 7-8 type of stuff. I'm going to call. And obviously, you know, once he sees that river, he's like, bingo. And then, you know, when you get shoved in 2 for 2.5x the pot against an aggressive opponent, you're super happy. So I'll give Stefan a 9 out of 10. I'll give Bit2Easy an 8.5 out of 10. So nice play by both of them. Not much to say. Very interesting how Stefan goes 3x to the button now. So, you know, at 100 big blinds, he was going 2.5, and then he was going 2.6 when they're 140 deep, and now at 200 big blinds deep, a little bit less, he's going 3x. Very interesting. Bit2Easy makes it 600 pre, so he sized up a bit, you know, so he doesn't give Stefan the best possible price. Pot's already $1,200. And we see a 9-deuce-deuce board, which is a really good board for Bit2Easy. Not because it improves him so much. I mean, he'll have some 9x and maybe an occasional deuce. It's just because it doesn't really improve anybody. I mean, Stefan is not going to call 12 big blind 3-bet with many deuces. He's going to have a couple of 9s himself and maybe even pocket 9s. I mean, almost for sure he'll have some pocket 9s. But other than that, he doesn't really hit much. So Bit2Easy gets to be quite aggressive on a board like this. And so Bit2Easy bets, you know, around 800 into around 1200, 2/3 pot, which is a fine bet size. You can use almost any bet size and it's reasonable. Small, medium, large, 1500, almost any sizing here is somewhat reasonable. The 7 is a somewhat blank card. I mean, both guys can definitely have 7s, maybe 9-7. Both guys can definitely, you know, have like better floated the flop with hand like 6-7 or something like that. So it's not the most relevant card, but obviously both guys add a bit of equity. Okay, you know, in total you have 100% equity, so you don't both add equity, but both guys will have more straight draws, flush draws, whatever now. So Bit2Easy bets 3/4 spot. You know, he's clearly saying he's got at least a good 9, but a lot of overpairs as well. And the 8 definitely changes things. I mean, Bit2Easy could easily have a hand like 6-5 suited or Jack-10 suited, maybe even offsuit. He could have hit a hand like 2-pair with 9-8, but I think it's more likely Stefan has a hand like 9-8. Or I think it's more likely Stefan has a hand like 8s than for Bit2Easy to have it. So it'll be interesting to see what Bit2Easy bets. With 5.3k behind and a pot of 6.3k, I think shoving is going to be his most frequent option. But I wouldn't be shocked if he bets really small, so Bit2Easy does shove, which I like. I think that's the best sizing. Okay. Wow. Okay. Bit2Easy bet 3-bet pre, fine. C-bet flop turn river. It is thin, you know. Stefan can definitely show up with a hand like 10s or ace-9 or a set, whatnot. Or a hand like Jack-10 of diamonds. So it's a thin shove, but obviously Stefan is an aggressive player. He can make loose call when he needs to. So it's a thin shove, but it's fine. I'll give Bit2Easy a... I'll give him a 9 out of 10. Good play. Stefan's play is a little bit more interesting, right? Obviously calling a 3-bet, but then against 2/3 pot, he still calls with the 6 high draw. That's quite loose, you know? If Bit2Easy were to bet like 3rd pot, half pot, it would be much closer. So loose call on the flop, I understand. On the turn, though, he called the turn with a gut shot, which is not to the nuts on a paired board with a flush draw on it. So he must think that Bit2Easy is going to just check the river a lot, and he can just blast off, right? Or maybe... you know, river 6 or a 5 and get it. So, you know, Stefan's play looks like a bit of an exploitative play. It seems like he's saying, hey, Bit2Easy, fuck you. I think you're just barreling a lot, and, you know, I'm going to take it away from you on the river. Obviously, he did take it away from him on the river, but, you know, through getting one of the best cards in the deck for him. So, and these types of plays do happen in piles sometimes, but obviously, you know, this is, it is an ambitious play. I'll give Stefan a 7 out of 10. I'll give him a 9.5 out of 10 for heart, but this was a bit loose. It looks to me like he's adjusting the Bit2Easy's play. Like he's thinking that Bit2Easy will, you know, not really fight back on the river, and he could probably get him there. Or obviously that he rivers the 8, and obviously he can get max value, and Bit2Easy does value shove. So yeah, very loose play for sure. It does happen sometimes, this type of stuff, but you know, this is quite loose. So that's definitely a fun one to end this stream on.